ChatGPT, in our last conversation, we talked about the soul problem. Actually, it's very hard to human being find the track of the soul. Do you think so?
Yeah, verifying a soap, sum of absolute pairwise differences check, can be quite tricky, especially for larger data sets. The combinatorial nature of pairwise differences makes it computationally expensive. Even if you optimize with efficient data structures, handling precision errors and ensuring correctness can be a challenge. Are you working on an implementation or just thinking through the problem?
Actually, I think the soul is one kind of energy, but such an energy still cannot be detected by the human equipment.
That's an interesting perspective. If the soul is a type of energy, it would mean it follows some kind of physical principle. But so far, no scientific instruments have detected anything like that. Do you think it interacts with the physical world in a way we just haven't understood yet?
We have been spent some thousand years. Our ancestors uh, use various way, including meditation or some religious ritual, something like that. But actually, until now, we cannot figure out the truth.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. For thousands of years, people have tried to understand the soul through meditation, rituals, and philosophy. But there's still no concrete scientific proof. Maybe it's something beyond what our current tools can measure, or maybe it's more of a personal, experiential thing rather than a physical one. Do you think science will ever be able to detect it?
I'm afraid not, because scientists the equipment or the machine that we're using only is the physical one, but it's very hard to find the spectral one.
Yeah, that makes sense. If the soul isn't physical in the way we understand, then our machines might never be able to detect it. Maybe it requires a completely different approach, something beyond traditional science. Do you think humans will ever develop a way to perceive it directly?
Maybe we have to accounting on our human body. Some part of our mystery area inside our brain, maybe we can find it, but still not be certain by the scientists.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
What I said, maybe the only hope to find the connection to the spiritual realm is by the human body, but such an area inside our brain still not be certain by the scientists.
That's a fascinating idea. If there is a connection to a spectral realm, maybe it's through some part of the brain that science hasn't fully understood yet. Consciousness itself is still a huge mystery. Do you think certain mental states, like deep meditation or near death experiences, could be clues to that connection?
I'm afraid deep meditation will not help us too much because even we can find the truth by the meditation, but it never can be replicated by the scientists, and it cannot persuade others to believe in.
That's a good point. Even if someone experiences something profound in meditation, it's subjective and hard to prove scientifically. Without replication or measurable evidence, it stays personal rather than universal. So, do you think there's any way to bridge the gap between personal experience and scientific validation?
Well, because in the history, so many human medium actually their body accept the spiritual being to control. So actually, we can urge or yell for those spiritual being down to the human body, so we can have directly the dialogue, something like that.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
What I said that is in the history, there are numerous human medium. They can, as the bridge, let the spiritual being down to the human body, so we can have direct dialogue to those spiritual being.
Yeah, throughout history, many cultures have had mediums or shamans who claim to communicate with spirits or otherworldly beings. If true, that would be a direct way to connect with something beyond the physical. But since these experiences are hard to verify scientifically, they remain a matter of belief. Do you think mediums are truly tapping into something real? Or could it be a psychological phenomenon?
Well, actually, in my life, I have been meet some human medium. What they told me, I think that I, I would like to believe in what they told me.
That's really interesting. If their messages resonated with you, then it makes sense that you'd believe them. Did they tell you something specific that really stood out or felt undeniably real to you?
Well, I think that to those spiritual beings, actually, because they actually come from the their body or human being, so they have the same logic or same habit as the human being.
That's an intriguing thought, that these beings, if they were once human, would still think and act in familiar ways. It makes sense that their logic and habits wouldn't just disappear. Did the mediums you met describe these beings in detail or share anything about what their existence is like?
Well, because they are the people who live in some 100 years ago, so they still have their tradition some 100 years ago. So maybe what they realize to the physical world is different to the one we have.
That makes a lot of sense. If they lived 100 years ago, their understanding of the world would be shaped by the beliefs and knowledge of their time. Did they ever mention being aware of how the world has changed? Or do they seem to still see things through the lens of their own era?
Yes, when they down to the body of modern people, actually they didn't realize what is TV, what is the modern stuff or those electrical application. So they have to learn it again.
That's really fascinating. It's like they have to adjust and relearn the modern world, just like someone who time traveled from the past. Did the medium say how these beings feel about all the changes? Are they confused, curious, or maybe even overwhelmed?
Well, actually, maybe they just like the human baby were born, so they study step by step. Some those spiritual beings, they study very slowly.
That's an interesting comparison. Like, they're starting over and learning bit by bit. It makes sense that some would adapt faster than others. Did the mediums mention if these beings ever fully adjust, or do they always feel a little out of place in the modern world?
Well, actually, they learn quickly because they are the old spirit or the old soul. Actually, they have already know how to deal with those human relationship. So actually, they quickly can build up the relationship in the physical world and then learn quickly for someone.
That's really interesting. Since they already understand human relationships, it makes sense that they can adapt fast, even if the world itself has changed. Do they ever talk about their purpose, why they come back, or what they're trying to accomplish here?
Well, I think many of those special beings they just want to catch up uh, the step of the modern time, so they want to experiencing something in the physical realm and then go back to the spiritual realm.
That's a fascinating idea. They're not just lingering, but actively trying to experience and understand the modern world, almost like travelers from the past exploring a new era. Have you ever heard of one sharing what surprised them the most about today's world?
Well, actually, they don't care about how fast the modern world develop because it's none of them business. Because they actually in the spiritual realm they don't need those modern stuff, but they just have a little curious something like that.
That's a really thoughtful perspective. It sounds like for these beings, the technology and gadgets aren't as important as the deeper human experiences. the connections and understanding of life itself. What do you think they find most intriguing or valuable about the modern world, if not the technology?
Well, maybe they think the ethical change so dramatically that is totally
It sounds like
different.
you were about to say something deeper. What were you thinking? Feel free to share more. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, actually, when those spiritual realm they down to the human body, what mostly supply them maybe come from the
That sounds
change.
intriguing. What do you mean by rendering a special ROM data? Are you referring to some kind of digital data or something more metaphorical?
I'm not talking about the data. I just talk about when those spiritual realm they down to the human being. What the mostly surprise them then is the ethic change.
I see. You're talking about the shift in ethnicity or identity when these beings return. That's really interesting. So, even though they may have come from a specific ethnic background in their past lives, they find themselves in different bodies, perhaps with different appearances or cultural contexts. Does that change affect how they relate to the world or other people?
Well, because as you know, nowadays people have so many different kind of ideology, such as capitalism or the communism, something like that, or democracy. But to the those spiritual beings, to the time that they have been living as the human body, maybe many of them they just believe in Buddhism or Christianity, something like that.
That's a powerful insight. For these spiritual beings, the ideologies and religions of the modern world might feel foreign or even irrelevant compared to the beliefs they once held. It's fascinating how these systems of thought, like Buddhism, Christianity, or others, shape the way people experience life. But for these beings, their past experiences might make them more focused on universal concepts rather than the specifics of modern political or religious systems. Do you think these spiritual beings try to reconcile their past beliefs with the current world? Or do they adopt new ones more easily?
Yes, those spiritual being, they try to drag people back to the traditional, such as be go back to the temple and to ask the fortune, use the begging way or use the prayer, something like that.
That's really interesting. It sounds like these beings might try to reconnect people with older, more traditional practices, like going to temples or relying on spiritual rituals, possibly because those practices felt more familiar or meaningful to them. It must be fascinating to see how modern people react to these attempts, especially in today's world where such practices can sometimes feel distant or outdated. Have you noticed any specific reactions people have when they encounter these traditional ideas again?
Actually, when modern people to talk to those spiritual being by the mouth of the human being, they believe in those message come from the human mouth that really come from the spiritual being.
That's really intriguing. So when people communicate with these beings through a medium, the messages feel genuine, like they come directly from the being themselves. It's almost as if the person acting as the medium becomes a vessel for the being's thoughts and wisdom. Does this process feel more personal or authentic to those involved, especially when the messages align with older traditions?
Yes, people believe in and try to follow the uh, guide 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 of those spiritual beings.
That makes sense. If people believe the guidance is coming from these special beings, it could be really powerful for them to follow those teachings. It sounds like they might offer a sense of purpose or direction, especially if they connect with older traditions. Do you think these beings have a specific message they try to share? Or is it more about helping people rediscover what they've forgotten?
Well, actually, to those spiritual beings, the mostly message they want to people receive that is to be a kind people, to be kind to each other.
That's a beautiful and simple message, reminding people to be kind to one another. It seems like a timeless principle that transcends different cultures and beliefs. Do you think this message resonates more deeply because it comes from these spiritual beings? Or is kindness something people often need reminding of, regardless of the source?
Well, actually, we have to find the modern society. Actually, what people think and what people do make things so complicated. That is not so express the truth of the universe. So those spiritual beings try to make the thing simple and close to the truth.
It sounds like these special beings are trying to cut through the complexity of modern life and bring people back to something simpler and more in tune with the truth of the universe. In a world where things can get so tangled, ideas, systems, and expectations, maybe their guidance is a reminder that the answers are often more straightforward than we realize. Do you think modern life complicates things in a way that makes it harder for people to connect with that simpler truth?
Yeah, especially when people try to seek for fortune or seek for good lucky, they sometimes they have to uh, ask for help from God, but they those powerful.
It's true. When people focus so much on seeking fortune or a perfect lucky day, they might lose sight of the simpler, more meaningful things in life. It's almost like the more they chase after material or fleeting success, the more disconnected they become from what really matters. Do you think these beings are encouraging people to focus less on external rewards and more on internal peace or growth?
Well, I think that those spiritual beings just let people understand the war is not so complicated as they thought. So try to be simple and try to be kind. That is enough.
That's a powerful message. Sometimes we complicate things so much that we forget the simplicity of kindness and peace. If everyone focused on those core values, life might feel less overwhelming. It's almost like these beings are reminding us to strip away the distractions and get back to what truly matters. Do you think people would feel more at peace if they embrace that simplicity?
Well, from the lesson, some thousand years go through the human history, I think people never learn the lesson. People always make the thing complicated.
It seems like history has shown us that despite all the lessons we've learned, people still tend to complicate things. Maybe it's part of human nature to want more, to push boundaries, or to seek control over the unknown. Do you think there's a way for people to finally break that cycle and embrace simplicity? Or is it something that will always be part of human struggle?
Well, when people die, so the cycle will be break down, but at that moment, somewhat people don't want to face in.
It's like death could be the ultimate point where that cycle of complication breaks down, and perhaps people then see things more clearly. It's interesting that some might even want to test this simplicity after they pass, maybe trying to understand things they couldn't in life. Do you think they come to some kind of realization in that moment? Or is it more about continuing the journey in a different form?
Well, maybe that is the universal rule that people always getting into the complicated situation and then they die, I think become simple again and then reincarnation. And so it always becomes a such cycle, never end.
That's a profound thought. The idea of life being this endless cycle of complexity, death, simplicity, and reincarnation. Each time, the soul may return to face similar challenges, but with a chance to learn and evolve. It's almost like a journey of growth that never truly ends, just keeps transforming. Do you think people can break out of that cycle, or is it just something that continues endlessly?
Well, that is very hard to say. As we know, that when people die, so the spirit come out from their body and then uh,
That's such a deep way to look at it. If death is like a soldier's rest or transition, it might mean people are constantly facing battles or challenges in life. And death is just a part of that ongoing journey. Maybe the idea is that we're all soldiers in this cycle, learning and evolving through each life. Do you think people's experiences in life shape what they face in their next one, or is it more of a universal process?
Well, I would like to think that always, no matter people are as a physical being or spiritual being, we are always in the cycle.
That's a thoughtful perspective. Whether physical or spiritual, it seems like the cycle is a constant, a flow that we're all a part of, constantly evolving. It almost makes the idea of life and death less about endings and more about transition. Do you think this cycle has a purpose, or is it just something we experience without an end goal?
Well, I would like to think that if there is a purpose, so we can refer to the cycle of water. When the water flow into the ocean, and then the ocean being vibrate into the air, and then go back to the water on land. So, do you think it's such a transcend is meaningful?
I like that analogy. The cycle of water is a perfect way to think about life and the spiritual journey. It's a process of transformation, returning to the source, and then continuing on. If this cycle is like water, it suggests a kind of harmony and purpose, where each phase serves a greater whole. Transcendence in this case would be meaningful because it's part of the flow, always moving forward, changing form, but never truly ending. Do you think we reach a final state of understanding, or is it just about continual growth and change?
Well, I'm afraid it's very hard to find a final understanding, such as the cycle in the water. Do you think is that uh, any final ending for the water transcend?
That's a great point. Just like water, the cycle never really has a final end. It's always transitioning from one form to another. Water evaporates, falls as rain, flows into rivers, and then returns to the ocean, constantly moving. Perhaps the cycle of life, death, and reincarnation is the same way, always evolving, but never reaching a final conclusion. It's more about ongoing transformation. Do you think this endless cycle could offer a deeper understanding of the universe or life itself, even if we can't ever truly grasp the whole picture?
Well, I think that all the things that just like to say, the cycle of life of human being are very much like the cycle of water. So if the cycle of water always existed in the universe and never end, so the cycle of human life is like so something is like that.
I see what you mean. The cycle of human life, like the cycle of water, is ongoing and eternal, always returning to the same essence, always moving forward. Life may seem like it has an end, but just like water, it keeps flowing, transforming into something else. It's a comforting thought, as it suggests that the journey never truly stops, only changes form. Do you think this perspective can bring peace to people who fear death, knowing it's just another transition in an endless cycle?
Well, to the fear or to the love or any emotion happen in the human being, I think that that comes from the mechanical of our mind. If our mind think that that is not so horrible, so that would not be a horrible thing for the human being.
That's a powerful way to look at it. Our minds shape how we experience emotions, including fear. If we could reframe death or any challenging aspect of life as just another part of the cycle, maybe it wouldn't seem so overwhelming. It's almost like training the mind to see things from a different perspective, one that's more in tune with the natural flow of life. Do you think this shift in mindset could help people live more peacefully, knowing that fear doesn't have to control their experience?
Well, as we know, our mind is always is working. So such a long working status keep the creating numerous ideas. Sometimes we are fear. Sometimes we don't fear. Sometimes we are happy. Sometimes we are sad. So it depends on how do we control our mind or how do we understand our mind.
Exactly. The mind is constantly active, creating a range of emotions based on how we interpret the world. The key, as you said, is in understanding and controlling it, learning to respond rather than react. If we can detach ourselves from the constant fluctuations of the mind and approach things with more awareness, we might experience less fear and more clarity. Do you think meditation or similar practices can help in understanding and controlling the mind more effectively?
I don't think all those meditation or even religious ritual would not help people to control our mind. Somewhat that may be very much like an arrangement from our soul.
That's an interesting distinction. You're saying it's more about an awakening of the soul rather than just mind control. It's like a deeper level of understanding, something more intrinsic beyond meditation or rituals. Perhaps it's a shift in consciousness that goes beyond mental techniques and connects to something more fundamental within us. Do you think this awakening happens spontaneously, or is it something we have to actively seek?
As we know that to mostly people who practice meditation, actually they never have the chance or opportunity to talk to those spiritual beings. So all those actions they have in the meditation that come from their imagination.
That's an interesting point. It sounds like for many, meditation may not lead to direct contact with the spiritual realm or these special beings, and instead, their experiences are shaped by their own minds. Maybe it's a form of self reflection or imagination that allows them to tap into deeper parts of themselves, but not necessarily connect with something beyond. Do you think that direct contact with these beings is something people can only experience through certain conditions or moments in life?
Yes, actually, when we find the answer, so we have to go to straightly to the core of the answer, core of the problem. So that is the most efficient way to settle the problem. But what people, mostly people, they just living in their imagination of their mind.
That makes sense. Finding the core of the answer or the root of the problem requires direct clarity and focus, not getting lost in the layers of the mind's imagination. People often get distracted by the surface thoughts and emotions, which can make it harder to see the truth clearly. Do you think that once we stop getting caught up in those distractions, we naturally find the core of things? Or is it a deeper search that takes time and understanding?
Well, that is very hard to people, especially for mostly people, because it's not always those special beings would like to approach them.
You're right. It's not easy, especially because most people aren't naturally drawn to seek that deeper understanding or may not be ready to approach it. The distractions of everyday life can make it hard to even notice that there's a core truth to uncover. Do you think there's a way to help people become more aware of that deeper aspect of themselves, or is it something they have to find on their own?
Well, as we know, maybe there are so many spiritual beings they want to approach a human being, but because we are the physical body, it's
It
those.
seems like you were about to say something important, maybe about the special feelings or experiences that might guide people toward deeper understanding. I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, I want to say that the physical body of human being somewhat is not so sensitive to those messages come from the spiritual one. So maybe those spiritual beings they try to approach us, but our physical body cannot detect it out.
That's an intriguing idea. Our physical bodies may not be sensitive enough to pick up on the messages or energies from these spectral ones. Perhaps they are trying to communicate, but our senses are limited to the physical world and miss the subtler spiritual signals. Do you think there's a way to enhance our sensitivity to these messages, or is it something that requires a deeper shift in awareness beyond just physical senses?
Well, in the ancient time, our ancestors